Teachers, what was the best excuse for being late that turned out to be true? Story 1. Me. My bus hit a bird and the whole windshield was cracked. We had to wait for another bus to pick us up. Story time. I was the only high schooler on our school bus one winter. The other detail important to this, the story is that we had the oldest model bus that wasn't in the best mechanical shape. It had one of those mechanically operated doors. It would shoot out a plume of black smoke every time it started, and just looked much less fancy than all the other buses the school had. Anyway, one winter it was so cold that the diesel engine stopped working. The bus driver said the cold made the diesel in the fuel lines gel up. I have no idea if that's accurate, but either way, the bus wouldn't start. Fortunately, we were only 5 miles from the school, and all the kids had been picked up already. So they just radioed another, newer bus to loop back around and pick us up. The bus driver had radioed the elementary school, but completely forgot to let the high school know. So I show up to class, and the teacher asks why I was late. I said, the cold caused the fuel lines to gel up in the school bus, repeating exactly what the bus driver told us. But I was the only high schooler on that bus, so no other students were there to back up my story. The teacher didn't believe me, and instead of just calling the main office to verify my story, she mocked me in front of the whole class, saying it's not possible for fuel to freeze in the cold, and everyone in the class agreed with her, saying that I was a bad liar and laughed at how dumb my story was. Yeah, diesel is basically an oil, and will turn to wax in cold enough conditions. You can buy anti-waxing additives, but in really cold places, you need a wraparound electric heater for your fuel filter. I'm guessing your teacher wasn't a chemistry teacher, or from Alaska. Story 2. Former student here. Sorry, boss, my stepdad tried to end my life last night, and I had to deal with the cops. Professor just looked at me for a moment and said, Dude, do you want to go grab a drink and talk about this after class? Man, my English professor was a bro when I was in college. All good now? Yeah, dude's been unalive now for 8 years. He didn't take care of himself. His alcoholism finally caught up with him. I had to pick the pieces up from what was left behind, and in the process learned a lot about who I am and what I can do. It took a few years to get my head on straight and learn that life isn't just one big crisis. Lots of time analyzing my reactions and the events I found myself in. Therapy, psychiatry help, the works. I'm in a much better and healthier place, and that event was about a decade ago. I've blossomed into a weird yet passionate and functional adult, a provider for those that need help, and a mentor and a friend. I wish things had been different growing up, but I'm happy with how I turned out despite all the odds. Thank you for asking. Story 3. In high school, I biked to class. One day, I hit a rock and ate absolute doo-doo. I obviously got to class late. Before I could say a word, my teacher stopped class and said, "Thank you for finally joining us. Why are you so late?" I raised my heavily bloodied hands and elbows. It must have looked bad because she audibly gasped and rushed me to the school nurse, apologizing nonstop the entire way. My bad, I'm not a teacher. I slipped while cutting my apple up before a soil science lab. It was a medium cut, but there was no makeup lab available for this experiment because it was the first of 3 weeks of experiments. Wrapped it up in toilet paper and figured I'd just use the first aid kit in the lab to shut it down, worst case scenario, and disinfect it. It didn't hurt much, but it just wouldn't chill out. It was also winter, so I put gloves on and went to catch the bus, 10-minute ride to the uni. By the time I got to the lab, there was blood everywhere. It was a small but very deep cut. I showed up to lab on time, but my professor took one look at the blood dripping down my arm and said, "I admire you bringing yourself here, but Christ, go to the clinic." My professor started my experiment for me, literally just making mud milkshakes for an hour, and every subsequent lab would ask if I was missing any limbs that morning. Story 4. Literally today, a child missed my first hour class. Notes said there was a car accident on the way to school and would be coming late. Kid comes for the second hour, has pictures on his phone of the rollover accident. What the F, kid? Go home. Rest. Take care of yourself. Edit. I have another one, although this one happened to a classmate when we were in college training to be teachers. She missed a really important class and came for just the last 10 minutes or so because her neighbor knocked on her door while in active labor asking for help a little while before she was supposed to leave for class. Classmate walked back to the neighbor's house with Prego and delivered her baby in the living room while on the phone with 911. Paramedics came and mom and the baby were fine, but my classmate needed to go home and shower and change because she was covered in blood. Not school related, but my mom was in an accident where her car rolled and got totaled on the way to work. She said the trooper who gave her a lift had never in their life had someone ask to be brought to work after a car accident, and my mom took a selfie with the trooper. She worked her whole shift. Her only complaint was her coffee spilled when the car flipped. No injuries at all. Story 5. I had a student whose father had passed away and had not done any homework or prep for the geography class. From what I heard, the teacher scolded him for not doing so, but the student didn't want to say anything, presumably a sensitive issue. So his best friend shouted at the teacher, "Don't you have any shame? His father passed away last night." And the teacher said, "I don't care." There was an audible gasp, and I was in the next room. Needless to say, that teacher is no longer employed there. My sophomore year in high school, Dad passed away. I missed a week of school. When I got back, I tried to turn in my English assignment that was due the week I was out. Teacher wouldn't accept it and said it was late. I told her my father had just passed away and that's why I was out. She said, "I know, but it's still late." Went home and told my mother. The next day, the principal, my guidance counselor, and the superintendent had all contacted my teacher to rip her a new one. She had to accept my assignment. She was salty about that the rest of the year. That's craziness. Teachers like that should not be teaching. Story 6. I had a chemistry professor show up about 15 minutes late, just when people were about to leave. He shows up and explains that he has just been in a car accident. His car had been in a rollover, and he still showed up. He said he was okay. He drove a Volvo. Had a sociology professor in college who was never late for anything. One day we showed up for class and he wasn't there. After 5 minutes or so, we read the handbook to find out what level of professor he was and found that he was an associate professor and entitled to 10 minutes wait. A few seconds before his time expired, a voice came from under his desk saying, "Today we're going to discuss withdrawn personalities." He conducted the whole class from under his desk. Wow, I wasn't expecting that. Was he just role-playing a withdrawn personality, or was there more to it? Story 7. In my hometown, if you walked anywhere late and said the phrase, "Sorry, grain train," you were never challenged. It was extremely common for 50-plus carriage trains to run through the middle of town. Where I am, we have a similar problem with farmers transporting huge loads on the tiny 1.5-lane roads round here. In their defense, they will pull in when a tailback forms and let people pass, but quite often we're talking a tractor with 2 trailers loaded 2 cars wide with hay or whatever it is. Those kinds of large laybys are few and far between. We have the same thing in my hometown, except the bridge was up. That bridge is notorious for not following a schedule and always being up when you're in a hurry. The town is in Aalborg, Denmark. Story 8. MTV paid me $50 to fill my backpack with cement and carry it around for the day. I accepted that excuse. Students later regretted it, as a replacement backpack and college textbooks far exceeded $50. But he got his moment of fame, and I didn't penalize him for his tardiness. Gotta live a little. Someone found a newspaper article on this. Turns out it was $200. He earned $100 for the first day and $100 when he returned the next day. I remembered $50, but it was 19 years ago, so I was right to believe him. He still lost all his stuff, thanks cement, and I remember him telling me it wasn't worth it. What kind of idiot doesn't take his books out first? It was part of the requirement, as he explained it. Probably sounded exciting at the time. "Hey, you, guy on the street, let's fill your backpack right now." It included his notebooks and everything. Story 9. I was one of about 20 kids who were late to school. We showed up at the school office as a group, and when questioned why we were late, we said the school bus blew up. They questioned, "So the engine blew up?" The kids, "No, the whole bus, in flames. It blew up." There was much conference between the teachers, all of them thinking we embellished the story. Next thing you know, one of the admin staff has the news website open, a very obvious image of an entire bus on fire with a bunch of kids in our school uniform standing in front of it. Our late slip for class read, "School bus blew up." If that happened, I would walk home. If you could walk. Story 10. After 9/11, my small-town high school received bomb threats every week for 2 months, and they decided to make us attend school on a Saturday. Myself and about 5 others showed up for our classes, and every teacher said something like, "I can't wait for the excuses on Monday." Most of the excuses were something along the lines of family plans or whatnot, but one kid was made to read his dad's note aloud to the class because our first period teacher thought it was hilarious. In the most down-south accent you can imagine, it went something like, "My son ain't too smart, but he knows you ain't supposed to get punished for someone else being a dumb butt. Bought him a 6-pack so he was drunk. Y'all can screw off." I wish we had smartphones to record back then so I could share it. Story 11. I was a kid, physics 11th grade. The day prior to this day, my neighbor passed away, and her son was a friend of mine and also in this class. Terribly long story, but it was a seppuku by hanging, and I was the one who found her. I had nightmares all night and skipped the first half of school the next day. When my physics teacher saw me later, she asked where I was that morning. Before I could explain, she said that friend was looking for you and concerned. He seemed more worried than he should have been and was a little upset about you not being there. The guy's mom passed away, but he still went to class and didn't tell anyone, but was worried about me. I couldn't tell her what happened at that point, so I just said I overslept. Story 12. I'm Pink. A fair-skinned student, age 10, went with a friend to the Holi festival at a nearby Hindu temple where she was covered with red powder and dyed bright red from head to toe. Her mother, another teacher at the school, had made her sit for hours in the bathtub to soak it off. But even after another round of early morning shower scrubbing, she arrived at school a pleasant shade of pink. Technically, she wasn't late, but she stayed in her mother's classroom until the bell rang. Teachers' kids basically live in a ruleless society or an extremely strict one. Teacher, prosecutor, judge, and pastor. Story 13. When I was student teaching, I was late because there were a bunch of chickens in the middle of the road. They wouldn't move at all. This is the middle of a city of 200,000 people. Freaking chickens. I finally got to school and profusely apologized to my mentor teacher, and I told her why I was late, thinking it sounded ridiculous. She said, "Yeah, those chickens are freaking buttholes. They surrounded my car in the McDonald's parking lot last year. Don't worry about it." They were protesting the McChicken sandwich. Story 14. My best friend and I used to roller skate to school, and one day we both forgot to put our shoes in our backpacks, so we skated to the vice principal's office and got to skip the first period to go home for shoes. We stopped at Taco Bell on the way back for breakfast because we figured we were already excused. I had a teacher in high school that would tell us if we're going to be late, pick up coffee because 2 minutes late is the same as 15. That's what my first period teacher says now. Doesn't matter whether you come in 2 minutes late or an hour late, it's counted the same. Story 15. I had a teacher who showed up about halfway through the class. Apparently her car had slid, intense snowstorm the night before, and she had walked the last mile or so. That's dedication to students. On the topic of dedication to students, my networking instructor once tripped on a wire, bounced their head off the floor, concussion, then finished the lesson. Was gone for about a week or two, 3 or 6 classes, then came back because she was worried we were going to fall behind with a substitute teacher. Story 16. We had an exam in my class, and the teacher got a message from a student saying that he was going to be late because his car had a flat tire. The student was known to party. The teacher didn't think it could be true, so as a joke, the teacher asked him to bring the tire back. He brought the flat tire back in the middle of the exam. Needless to say, the professor didn't expect that. That student had been partying. Drives to school, takes off the tire, punctures it, and Bob's your Auntie Mary. Don't even need to puncture it, just deflate it a bunch and then after the exam, fill it back up. Story 17. Not me, but one of my good friends. She went to the Royal Military College of Canada, where they wear their uniforms and there are often tourists visiting the campus. Apparently, it was completely normal to be waylaid by tourists looking to have their photos taken with students in uniform that all they had to say when they walked in late was, "tourists," and the professors would let it slide. She always wondered how many family photos she was actually in over her time spent there. Story 18. I was the student. My neighbor had a really social goat, and she figured out how to escape her pen in order to come over and hang out. She escaped and followed me to the bus stop, and when the bus came, she tried to follow me onto it. I couldn't actually get on the bus without her being right behind me, so I had to get off, bring her home, and call my dad to bring me to school. My neighbor had a really social goat is the best thing I've read today. Thank you. Story 19. My auto teacher let me practice removing and adding the tires on his vehicle. The next morning, it was about 20 minutes into the first period, and no sign of him. He comes running into the classroom, out of breath, and his hair is all messed up. He points at me and says, "You, what is a torque wrench used for?" I respond with, "I don't know." He says, "I know you don't know." Turns out one of his tires came off while driving down the highway. Honestly, that's on him. You're an idiot if you don't check behind the student on something like that. So he didn't check your work before he drove? That's on him. You're a student. Story 20. Not a teacher, but a pupil. I was in a car crash on my way to school. About 5 cars were involved because some jerk decided to overtake us since we slowed down coming to a turn. So a trip to the hospital to get checked, and then school 3 hours late. I had small cuts all over my face from glass flying everywhere and had a really sore shoulder, but my teachers wouldn't believe me until the police showed up because they forgot to get a statement from me. Apparently, some of the other involved people passed away and the jerk got 8 years in prison. Story 21. Flock of wild turkeys in the road. Not always school, but this happened more than once in my life. For those of you who have never found yourself in this situation, there is no way out of it. Wild turkeys will move when they darn well decide to do so, and only then. Never been in this situation, but I've met some wild turkeys. They truly don't care. Interesting. The only time I drink wild turkey is when I truly don't care. Story 22. I'm not the teacher, but we are told that he had a paramedic student who, on their way to write their final exam, rolled their car into a creek, picked up whatever books they had out of their car, and ran the rest of the way to class. Obviously got there late and in tears. You better believe they had a different exam date. I missed my SAT once because the school bus got stuck in the ice. It was a residential school, so they didn't take snow days. Story 23. Student here. I headed into school early to get some studying done in the library before my night class. I was one exit away when I was caught in a 3-car accident. Most of the expressway afterwards was gridlocked with only one lane left open. I did eventually make it into my lab class 15 minutes late with a few scrapes and bruises. My professor's reaction was simply, "Oh, that was you? Was he the one who hit you?" Story 24. Not a student, but one of my teaching assistants when I ran a preschool in West Philly. Sorry I missed yesterday. My friend shot my mom. Naturally, I'm a little speechless. Oh no, it's okay. He was aiming for someone else. When I was a manager at a pizza place, one of the employees had the same excuse and attitude, except he was the one who got shot. He lived in North Philly, though. "It's cool," he said. "My bad." Well, okay then. "'Tis but a scratch." Story 25. Told me he got pulled over by the cops for wobbly driving on his bike, and they thought he was drunk. Turned out he was just dodging all the slugs on the street. Good man watching out for the sluggies. They like to traverse the walkway in front of my house at night, so I always have to shine a flashlight so I don't step on them. Story 26. Not a teacher, but I was training a new hire at a job, and the guy came in 45 minutes late, stating he got halfway to work and realized he didn't have shoes on. It was winter and like 15 degrees Fahrenheit outside. I did that in high school once. Mom got so mad at me. Story 27. I had a 6-year-old turn up late to her lesson and blurt out, "Sorry, I was late. I had to color in a bunny." Seems fair. Can't blame her. Coloring the bunny is an important job after all. Sounds like she has her priorities in order. Story 28. UK. A student couldn't submit an assignment on time as the Wi-Fi was down on the megabus. Cheers for all the love, and I'll be sure to tell the students his megabus mishap is relatable across the globe. Standard, to be honest. Wait, there's Wi-Fi on megabus? Story 29. She had to take her sister to school and drive her mom to rehab. She was always late to class because her mom just wanted to sleep in. Problem was, if the mom was late or did not go, she would have violated her probation and gone to prison. I never marked her late. If she missed anything important, she could come in at lunch or after school to make it up. Story 30. School sporting event. Kid on our team was late because someone stole his windshield wipers and it was snowing out. Kept having to pull over to the side of the road and wipe off his windshield. Wow, that's a real mustard that swiped his wipers on a snowy day. Story 31. Bear in the backyard. No access gate. Animal control had to tranquilize it from the room and drag it through the house. Made the news. Got to retake the test I missed after sending her the news article. Still have access to the article? I kind of want to see it too. Story 32. This was me as a student. My parents thought I got President's Day off, so they didn't wake me up. Just out of curiosity, how old were you at the time? This was 7th grade, so 13? Story 33. Not a teacher, but a friend said his house blew away. Apparently, tornado. May have been my house, and took about a week off from school to help clean up my house. Story 34. A guy in my college class missed class one day. The next day he came in with his eye covered up and medical paperwork in hand. Apparently he got pecked in the eye by a chicken. Click on one of the videos you see on the screen now, or a Karen will sue you.